I want to make a quick one, again, I know it's a running joke about my channel, a quick video. 6.8 versus 7.3. I see this asked all the time on groups. When the 6.8 first launched, I kind of thought it was going to be only a commercial engine option for fleet purchases. As we see now, some of the lower trim trucks, XL, first of all, has it as a standard. And strangely, I'm pretty sure the Dually F350 XL has only a 6.8 gasser option. Now, I'm assuming it's because that's kind of intended for specifically a commercial client. And that's an interesting thing in and of itself. A dually with the lesser motor, engine, motor, whatever. I think we should talk a little bit about because people literally ask, should I get the 6.8 over the 7.3, or should I for sure get the 7.3 over the 6.8? Those of you who are new to my channel, I have a 2023 F350 7.3 373 gears, 18,000 pound goose and conventional rating, and 4,380 pounds payload. It's a pretty darn decent truck. I really like my truck. I use it for everything for empty driving, commuting, as I joke about picking up pizza, to moving my mini excavator and dump trailer fully loaded between 14 and 17,000 pounds. Moving a decent-sized sailboat, decent-sized powerboat, and then everything recreationally too. Power sports trailer, snowmobile trailer. So little stuff, big stuff, little boats, big boats. Kind of does everything. And I don't really off-road this truck, but I definitely take it on 2 tracks and just kind of exploring, adventuring off-road on trails. When I say trails, I mean literally like glorified or, lesser driven 2 tracks if you want. I used to wheel, and I'd like to get back into doing more wheeling with full-size trucks. Thing is, as I got older, and I've talked about this on the channel before, and here's where the video starts getting longer unnecessarily, is that I found that excessive wheeling on your daily driver not only just makes it look like crap, but it's just going to cause extra parts where that doesn't need to happen. I'm definitely been doing more power sporting lately and avoiding the wear and tear on my truck, because basically no matter what you do, if you're going to off-road, especially in Michigan, you're going to get Michigan pinstripes, and I really like how pretty my truck is. So moving forward on that, that's kind of how I use my truck, and it's important if you're going to watch YouTube videos with people, you should definitely make sure that, number one, they're knowledgeable in the field that they're discussing, and that they're personally experiencing those things with their truck that you're discussing with them. As many of you know, my background is I've been driving HT trucks since I first got my driver's license, everything from Cummins, Duramax, 6.7 Power Stroke, and I've towed with 6.0 and 7.3 Power Strokes, never driven a 6.4. I've been around the block just a little bit, I've done a lot with gas engines, V10, 6.0, 6.4 Hemi. I've towed with a lot of different trucks, so I have a pretty good background on what's going on. So let's talk about the 6.8 and the 7.3. So they are basically functionally the exact same engine, and we'll have a discussion in here comparing peak horsepower, peak torque, what RPMs they're at, and a little bit of specs later on. Let's talk about just kind of what is going to matter to you. Towing any weight within the speed limit, if you're not climbing a grade, you do not need to have the power that the 7.3 has. This engine is not taxed at 17,000 pounds. No, I've not towed more than what I'm assuming to be 17,000 pounds. Is it 17.3 or 17.5 or 17.1? I don't know. Is it, I don't think it's 16.8. I think it's 17 or so. This engine is not taxed to go the speed limit on flat land. It'll do it every single day of the week. So if you are buying a 6.8 and you're going to tow, this is just so common with these Super Duties. So many of you guys are travel trailer owners, first-time travel trailer owners, or smaller boat owners, things like that. The 6.8 is, as far as I know, and we're going to review the specs, literally the more detailed part after this. As far as I know, it is also a class leader, even though it's Ford's lesser motor. So you should be very confident in buying that engine in this truck. I personally wouldn't trade my truck to buy a 6.8 for the reason of I like to go fast and I like to have a little extra power, and 7.3 sounds cool and 445 cubic inches sounds cool. It's the cool factor for me. Does that mean that the 6.8 is in any way an inferior platform for 99% of people? It absolutely does not. If it saves you the money you need to save in order to get into a new truck, it is worth buying. I personally wouldn't opt for a lesser or for the lesser motor for any other reason than it allows you to get whatever truck you want. I personally was seeking out less features, cloth seats, less garbage to go wrong in my truck. I seeked out the STX that I own. I wanted this truck. I wanted the middle seat. I didn't want any more leather. I didn't want any more heated seats or anything else to go wrong. I wanted this lesser truck. I know a lot of people who have kind of a personal thing, and that's totally fine. I want a Lariat or better, and that's fine. It comes with a cost. If you want that cost, if you want that complexity, if you want those extra things to go wrong, and that's what makes you happy, and if you can even get, see, I'm talking a little out of turn here. Can you even get a 6.8 with a Lariat? I don't know. Off the top of my head, I can't. We'll look at that in just a second. If that 6.8 makes it so you can afford the truck that makes you happy, that you're proud to pay for, that is exactly what you should do, and no one should take that away from you. Functionally speaking, I don't think you're going to notice a difference under 12,000 pounds with a 6.8 versus 7.3. This engine just isn't working that hard. Things you might gain with a 6.8. It's probably going to burn less fuel at idle. It's probably going to burn less fuel empty, and it may definitely be a great engine for you to, if you do like 90% empty, and then you're basically just towing like a power sports trailer or a pontoon boat or a bass boat or things like that. It may be literally the right engine for you. The other thing that's interesting, and because it just came out in 2023, we don't really know and have seen it yet. Ford jumped right on the 7.3 in the aftermarket perspective. You could get a crate engine. As soon as that engine got launched, you could pick up heads, block, crank, pistons, whatever the heck you wanted. I'm surprised that we're not seeing much in the 6.8 yet. And the reason I say that is the performance potential with a 6.8 is likely going to be extremely high if somebody starts using it as a naturally aspirated high RPM engine. Why? Less piston mass, less reciprocating mass moving up and down means the engine is stronger at higher power levels at higher RPM. And the other thing, if the heads are the same as a 7.3, you're going to have more port flow intake and exhaust per displacement of the engine. So you're going to be able to take the same heads and spin them harder and make more power up top. Quick detail, what I meant by spin the heads harder, what I meant to say is like spin the engine higher RPM with those heads. It's going to respond extremely well to RPM. Minor detail, the 7.3 comes with a forged crank. Per my research, the 6.8 comes with a cast crank. There's nothing really wrong with a cast crank, especially in a OEM environment, like just a work truck. It doesn't matter. We don't need to have a forged crank in our work truck. But what it means is that the factory 7.3 with a factory crank is probably going to have a higher performance envelope with the factory crank. It's kind of why I'm wondering why the aftermarket hasn't really dived into the 6.8 and Ford hasn't really pushed it for the swap car perspective. I really think it's just going to be a low budget truck engine, but the potential is still there if you were to put a forged crank in, or if the cast crank just has a very well constructed and a high performance envelope. Maybe it holds a lot of power. Maybe we'll find out someday. When you can actually tune the 23s, my bet is people are going to be putting some boost to those 6.8s. What are you losing there? Well, on a drag strip, this isn't my 100% specialty, but I do know a little something about going fast. If you have too much torque off the line, it can impact your 60-foot time. Your 60-foot time has an awful lot to do with your total, the total performance of the vehicle. If you can get out of the hole just a smidgen faster, it makes a big difference on the big end. If you have an engine with too much torque or a vehicle too heavy or too much weight up front, this is a lot of reason why small blocks really do dominate drag racing. Even though it's easier to make power with a big block, it is difficult sometimes to hook up so much torque that comes on so furiously down low. It is sometimes better to have a more high-strung engine that makes a little bit of torque down low enough to get you off the line and the motor builds in a gradual manner. Does any of this matter for trucks? No. I think that's kind of the reason why I said I wouldn't personally opt to get one. It's a lesser truck motor in my mind. If you were going to someday apply boost to it, like I said, you're doing something different than what we're doing with just a work truck that's just being worked or off-roaded or whatever. I just think that the 7.3 is just better for that. But if you had any interest in turboing it, for instance, that small displacement engine with a slower piston speed, is going to take boost a lot better. And because those heads being potentially bigger for the amount of displacement you have, it may respond extremely well to boost. I don't know of anybody working with a 6.8 in the performance sphere yet, but I think that someday when they do, I think that they're going to be a wow factor motor, because it's a big engine, a decently sized small block. Yes, this is a big engine too, but 6.8 liters, around 415 cubic inches, which happens to be the size of the old V10. It's a pretty decent V8. Really, anything bigger than 400 cubic inches is kind of getting to be, yeah, it's a pretty nice little motor. And it's smaller than the 7.3, but it's also bigger than a 6.0. It's bigger than a 6.2. It's a decently big engine. So, and a lot of engines that are very sought after are around that 416 to 427 cubic inch area. That area of performance seems to be a sweet spot for piston speed and engine longevity at high RPM and high performance. So, I can see some interesting, intriguing, thoughts with that. If the 7.3 didn't exist, I would be swooning over the 6.8. But because the 6.8 exists, it's kind of one of those things where I would like to advise against you getting the 6.8 unless it helped you out in some way. If it allowed you to get a truck that you wouldn't normally have been able to get, maybe that couple $1,000s makes a difference on getting that loan that you need to get, or maybe you're paying cash and you just want to have that you have a target number in mind, and that's what you can do, and that's the difference between getting a truck this year and not getting a truck this year. Do it. If it allows you to get the higher trim you want to get, do it. I think that from a commercial or a business aspect, anytime you can give an employee who probably doesn't respect your equipment and doesn't maybe respect you less power, they're going to abuse your crap less often. So I think no matter what you do, if you have employees and they're not respectful to you, if you give them more power, they're going to use it. So, and a lot of fleets, a lot of construction, a lot of tree work and that kind of thing, a lot of those type of businesses are getting gassers because they're doing the job. They're cheap up front. They're cheap to maintain. They get the job done, and they're not giving their employees a 6.7 diesel to play with. Because I guarantee you, every single one of my friends who works at a company that has 6.7 diesels flogs the crap out of them because they're so fast, they're so powerful. Yeah, you're beating the tar out of a truck that you're just supposed to get from point A to point B with. That is a consideration. It would be interesting to find out if that slightly lower power output in the exact same engine is able to allow Ford to achieve higher durability for vehicles that are intended to be at max GCVWR all the time, which may explain why the dual rear wheel F350 is in an XL can't be had with a 7.3, which is, to me, is the craziest thing that I can think of. Because when I drive my truck, what limits me in this F350 with 4,381 pounds of payload is actually its stability. It's not the power level. I can pull anything I want to pull with this truck within reason. It's not that. I can go the speed limit just like everybody else does. I'm not limited by power. I'm limited by the truck's stability, and that's just an inherent deal when you compromise your truck for towing. But let me remind you that when you compromise your truck for towing, you improve off-road performance, parking ability, ease of turning. Just a lot of things are improving. You're just losing some towing performance. So when I say that, having a longer wheelbase potentially may help towing a little bit. For sure, having a dually will help towing a lot. Dualies suck off-road. Dualies are tougher to park. They don't fit in parking spaces. If you operate in a tight environment, you're going to know it if you have a dually, because it's going to work against you. And I can promise you, on this soft ground, right now it's been raining. This is soft ground here. If you had a dually, and let's just say it was two-wheel drive, I almost bet you, in this stupid, weird circumstance, we're just sitting on grass, there's almost no hill to this. If you had a two-wheel drive dually, I'd almost guarantee you'd be stuck right now. I promise you this truck will just drop into gear and take off. It's just kind of the way dualies are. Just kind of the price you pay. So I hope that kind of covers 6.8 versus 7.3. I for sure don't have any hate toward them. I for sure would never have any reason to down anyone for having it. I just think in the long term of the truck's depreciation and things like that, people are going to be like, oh, you got a 7.3. That's awesome. I want to buy your truck. Where I don't think the 6.8 is going to captivate as much excitement in the secondhand market as the 7.3. Now, you decide yourself if you really give a crap about what the secondhand market thinks about your truck. I know when I bought my 6.7, I specifically ordered it in such a way where I thought the secondhand market would benefit me greatly. And I did very well in that truck. When I got a ton of use out of that truck, I traded it in for an excellent price. I got an awesome truck, put a bunch of money toward my truck, or put the equity, all the 100% equity. My 6.7 went into this, and I'm very, happy about that. Will that happen again? It's a gasser. It's a lower trim level. It doesn't have a center console. It doesn't have a sunroof. Doesn't have fancy stereo. All the things that I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I wanted, except for a lot of people, especially in 5 years from now, when they're in the truck market, they may not like my truck as much, So maybe we'll try and, because most channels are always, got the Platinums, the King Ranches, whatever. I'm very content with having my STX, and maybe we can make base trucks cool again. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. Hopefully that answered any of your questions that you may have had in regards to this topic, and we will get some technical conversation going on right now. So bore on the 6.8 is the same as 7.3 at 4.22. Stroke is shorter on the 6.8, so that's where the difference is. You get different displacement at 3.68 versus 3.98. Compression ratio is 3 points higher at 10.8 versus 10.5. Horsepower on the 6.8 is 405 at 5,000. Which is slightly lower RPM than the peak horsepower on the 7.3, which is 430 at 5,500. That's interesting. We'll talk about that in a second. Torque is peak at the same RPM of 445 and 485 at 4,000. Both recommend 87 fuel, which is what I run, and they are not ethanol compatible, just so everyone knows why that may be. With ethanol, the stoichiometric ratio is different because it requires more fuel per air with ethanol. So when you mix in a E50 or an E20 or an E85 mixture, it's going to need to be richer to have the proper stoichiometric ratio. And if you run different amounts of ethanol, like if you had a little bit of 87 in there, then you put some E85, they either have a sensor or they have a calculation that solves what the actual E ratio is, and then it adjusts the stoichiometric ratio from there. Ford probably decided, hey, there's not enough customers using E85 and they don't care, so they don't have an E85 compatible. That's as simple as that needs to be. It doesn't have the ability to either calculate or test the fuel to decide what the E quantity is, just so everybody knows how that works. A little bit of conversation about the heads. I tried really hard to find part numbers on everything. It appears they have the same heads, which is really interesting because it means the 6.8 has a huge amount of aftermarket potential, and for sure in a performance car atmosphere, I bet you money you'll see a 6.8 being put into like track cars, like a Mustang track car or whatever. It would be a phenomenal car to put into like a Cobra or a GT500 or GT40 kit car, or a Mustang for track duty or whatever. I feel like someday that's going to be an engine that's going to be heavily used. It's interesting that the peak horsepower is at 5,000 versus 430. And from what I could tell, they have different camshafts. I couldn't find the difference in the camshaft spec, and that would explain why we have a different RPM here. The camshaft is choking off the heads to limit the amount of airflow going in there, because the camshaft is kind of what controls the engine's performance entirely. And the heads will give you everything if you have a camshaft that holds a valve open long enough with enough lift. But with a less lift and less duration, they can limit the amount of airflow into the engine, which improves torque. So it meets the same max or peak torque rating at 4,000, but obviously substantially less than the 6.8 at 445. It is still, I mentioned being a class leader. It's a class horsepower leader by 4 horsepower, but it's not a torque leader. We'll talk about the 6.6 here in a second. It's at 464 foot-pounds. We'll talk about that in just a second. So I was off just a smidgen there, but hear me out. I was kind of thinking about horsepower leader. It's still, the 6.8 is still a very strong engine, and if you have one, you should be very proud to have it. If this was a time when the 7.3 didn't exist, the 6.8 would be absolutely bragged about as being an excellent engine. I would heavily prefer these two engines over the Hemi or over the 6.6. We'll talk about that in just a second. So here's a chart from the 6.6 L8T. It's at 464 foot-pounds of torque at 4,000, that's pretty good, and 401 horsepower at 5,200. As you can see, it's kind of an LS thing, is they, in any really small displacement, small block, the horsepower curve is kind of lame. And in this case, the torque curve is a little bit, definitely not flat 2, where the 7.3 just absolutely kills it. You know, I'm a big LS lover and a really big 6.0 fan in 5.3 and 4.8. I've just had a lot of luck and a lot of fun with those engines. The L8T's biggest problem, and I don't want to dive too much into it because we've talked about all these engines before, is the direct injection. It is not something you want to have on a long-term, reliable work truck. They did, as we've talked about before about emissions on here, they did it to meet emissions. It's something that they've done to have their whole V8 platform perform better in emissions tests. It is not a long-term reliable setup, especially without having booster injectors to clean the intake valves and ports. I personally don't want to own a direct injected V8 in a pickup truck at any time. And in the long run, any direct injected engine without multi-port injectors as a duplicate, like the newer 3.5 EcoBoost and the newer 5.0 Coyotes have booster injectors to help with more fuel in the engine for cheap, and also to help clean that intake port out. Direct injection just, it's not very exciting. It's much more expensive to fix, and it has a lot more problem areas because the direct injectors and the high pressure fuel pump is a lot less reliable than the really simple multi-port injection setup that a 6.8 and a 7.3 has. Being that they were able to meet whatever they needed to meet, Ford, with the power that they have in that engine, I just think both of them are just so hard to beat. This conversation would not be complete without the 6.4, not a Hemi. I had a 2017 Power Wagon for about almost 70,000 miles, and it was an amazing truck off-road. I really liked wheeling that truck. I liked the way it looked. I liked the way it drove. I hated the 6.4. It got terrible fuel economy empty. It got terrible fuel economy towing. It was a heavy metal turd towing, and it lost 5 horsepower this year because they couldn't meet emissions. So it's down to now 405 horse at 5,600 RPM. It is a very, very high-strung engine in such a heavy truck. It doesn't have the torque curve that you'd want to have for a work engine, 429 foot-pounds of torque at 4,000. It does not have a very flat torque curve. It just doesn't have a lot, where the 7.3 is just an animal from idle to 2,000 RPM. The 6.6 GM and the 6.4 Hemi just do not have that idle to 2,000 RPM or idle to 3,000 RPM performance like the 7.3 does. I need to spend more time in the 6.8 to kind of get a feel for it. It would be really fun to own one like in a regular cab. And like I said, I'd be very intrigued to try a 6.8 dually. I'm fascinated by the idea of why they'd put a lesser engine in a heavy-duty work truck. But nonetheless, again, an 87 octane engine, around that 10 to 1 compression. Just kind of it's an okay motor. It is so outdated. I guarantee you this is it. Either it's last year or it's second to last year. Ram, if you were to come out with a 426 for cars and for your half tons, and a 440 for your HD trucks with the same modular platform, just like Ford does, same block, same heads, a lot of similar stuff with a different crank, you would be right back in the competition, because I know that you guys are capable of building a great engine. The 6.4 is just not relevant today. It came out in 2014, and it hasn't been changed since 2014, which is now 11 years old. It is a little bit long in the tooth. It needs a change. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the conversation about the 6.8 and 7.3. I wanted to put all this in to have a full, rounded out conversation for those of you who want to stick around. Let me know in the comment section if you stuck around to the end. I appreciate you all, and have a wonderful day.